This is the Reluctant Leader Podcast, the podcast designed to help you if you've landed a leadership role through no fault of your own and now need to find out what you should be doing. I'm your host, Mark Terrell, and have been there and know what it feels like and made all the mistakes. In each episode, I'll be getting to grips with a leadership topic by interviewing an expert in their field. You'll find out why they do what they do and take away some top tips you can use to become a more confident leader. For more content and to keep in touch with how the project is developing, go to www.thereluctantleader.co.uk. If you have any comments about the episode, you'll find me on LinkedIn, Facebook and Twitter. So let's crack on with the show. Today I'm talking to Julia Carter. Julia originally qualified as a pharmacist and has worked within the learning and development arena for almost 20 years. Her experience has been predominantly within the pharmaceutical industry, where she partnered as a trainer and coach with all levels of employees across all functions ranging from research and development through to sales and marketing and operational support functions. This experience has not only enabled her to understand the intricacies of the pharmaceutical industry, but also to appreciate the challenges that leaders and employees face within such diverse functions. Hope you enjoy this chat we had about virtual teams, and I'll catch you all on the other side. Julia, welcome to the Reluctant Leader Podcast.
Hello.
I was, as I always do, I do a quick Google on the topic we're going to be talking about, and I Googled remote, and then I actually also Googled virtual teams, and I think we can probably talk a little bit about that, but we're going to be calling this virtual teams, and it's all about people that work together but actually don't ever probably work in the same building as one another. But before we get stuck into all that, I think that we always start with the question, why do you do what you do, and what was the pivotal moment that led you down this path?
Okay, so why do I do what I do? I guess it's linked probably to the fact that I love helping people be the best versions of themselves. And actually, it stems back to, I actually studied pharmacy and became a pharmacist for 2 or 3 years. And I suppose the common link there is it's still around helping people. That was about helping people get better and feel better in their health. And through my career as a pharmacist and then working within the pharmaceutical industry, I then found myself within the personal development arena and leadership development. And that's when I realized that's where my real true passion and career was. So that's where I have spent my last 20 years of my career working within that. And that's why I now do what I do. So I'm still helping people, but it's in more of a personal development way as opposed to health, although I suppose the two are linked.
Right. Yes. And as we're talking about virtual teams today, when did you start and get particularly into virtual teams? How did that come about?
Yeah. So probably about 5-6 years ago, I started my business Zest for over 9 years ago now. But probably six or so years ago, I noticed more and more of my leaders that I was working with were working with team members who are not located within the same building. A lot of the organizations I work with are global, but it just came to my attention that whilst I was there supporting them with their leadership needs, training them to really upskill in the leadership development area, actually some of the challenges were really the cause of some of their challenges was actually that they weren't sitting in the same room, the same building. They weren't regularly seeing their team members. So that creates a whole nother layer of complication to enable them to really connect with their team members and have a team that's truly operating as a high-performing team, even when they're dotted around the world at different time zones, different locations, different cultures, different languages. So there's a huge complication layered on top of the normal challenges. So that's where I realized that there really was a need for some sort of focus in on leadership of remote teams.
Yes, and I think as things develop, it's going to become more and more important as teams develop across the world. I've recently gained a client in Australia, which and it's only possible, obviously, because of the technology we have with the internet and other tools that use the internet to allow that to happen. So I guess that's important. Technology is important in this scenario.
Yes, technology plays a key part, and in today's world, it's so important that we embrace the technology that is available to us. One of the key areas I talk about in every single session when I work with remote leaders and remote teams is encouraging them to use their camera, their webcams. It never ceases to amaze me how many people are resistant to using them. There's many reasons for that. I've heard them all, and I'm sure there's even more out there. But I cannot emphasize enough, when people turn on their cameras and connect visually, it creates such a stronger connection. And I had one manager a couple of years ago who I spent a good 15 minutes having a heated discussion with him about why he should be using his camera. And I happened to bump into him the next day, and he came up to me and he went, "You're so right. I turned my camera on. They are actually humans at the end of the camera." And he was being serious. He hadn't ever met these people who were working in a very faraway country. So it's so powerful. And until you do it, you don't really realize. And I find it very strange now to not have my camera on when I am meeting with people. Every call I do now, I rarely use my landline or my mobile. It's normally through a webcam based meeting system.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you with that, and I just think it just adds an extra dimension, doesn't it? And it's as near as we can be to actually being in the room with somebody when we can actually see them, because phone calls are useful, but when you can see someone's face and you can see reactions, then that just adds that little bit extra. And it's surprising how much that adds to the conversation and to what's going on. So I know you do work with behavioural styles. So I'm guessing that different types of behavioural styles are more happier to switch on the camera than others.
Yeah, and I haven't actually. I maybe should do a sort of study into this, but my message to everyone I work with, whoever you are, I think there's some sort of psychological barriers around camera anyway, with regards to, I've heard people saying, oh, well, when I work from home, I don't put my makeup on. And, excuses that quite frankly, I find hard, because, if you were in the office and you needed to put makeup on, you would. So why would you not do it if you're having meetings at home? The other analogy I often use is, you wouldn't walk into the office or into a meeting with a bag over your head. So why would you sit at home without your camera on? Because it's effectively the same thing. But with regards to personalities, I think I'm not sure if turning the camera on, I haven't sort of tracked that as to different types of personalities, but certainly the thing I do see often is, if you are more of an introverted personality, i.e. you tend to internalize your thoughts and your feelings, you're less likely to share any challenges or concerns that are going on. And when a camera is turned on, a manager can pick up on that. So when they're having a conversation, just by body language, you can pick up whether there's something else there. Whereas when you've only got the phone, you just hear silence. It's very difficult to read unless you're very, very good at reading voice. It's very hard to pick up. Whereas people who are more on the extrovert scale or preference tend to just talk it out. So it's easier in a way because they're more open. But again, the camera just adds that additional dimension and therefore gives you more cues to pick up on.
So as far as the leader of the team goes, then it's important to almost have that skill or develop that skill that you are looking for certain things without it being manipulative. Obviously, we are, when we're leading the team, we are almost, we're sort of responsible for everyone, and we need to show that we're actually checking in with people, not just on a business level, but actually on a personal level, I guess, as well.
Absolutely. And that's one of the other points I always make with leaders. How well do you really know your team? Because when they are dotted around the world, especially those who are in different time zones, what tends to happen is, because you maybe have 6 or 8 or maybe even more people all coming online at the same time, you may have a minute or two at the beginning of a meeting to have a quick catch up while you're waiting for people to come on. But there isn't enough time spent just chatting. And what happens is you have an hour scheduled into your diary, so the meeting might get going by 5 past the hour, and then you've got a full agenda, and then sometimes people have to leave early, and it's always around business. And when you're working virtually, it's so important to schedule some time just to connect, just to have social conversations as you would if you were working in the office and catching up with somebody over the coffee machine. Because building that connection and those strengths of relationships obviously is the key. It's fundamental for building trust. And if there isn't trust within a team, it's never going to be a high performing team. So it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, creating topics to talk about from a social perspective is quite difficult. Some people are more open about sharing personal things than others, but a good remote virtual leader will create that conversation and allow that to happen.
Yeah, it is really important, and you don't really realize what you're missing until you actually are in that position. Because I can remember when I first started out, and you gain lots of freedom by working from home or working at clients' premises rather than having to go to a premises every day. But what you don't realize is actually what you get from others, and the social aspect and actually connection to others. It's only when you don't have that you realize how actually that was quite important. I'm sure you come across that.
Absolutely. And again, this to me links to personality types. I mean, I have an extroversion preference, and therefore I get energy by being around other people. So if I'm working at home a lot alone, I do actually have somebody who works with me in the office. So that actually I do get some social interaction through that. But I've spoken to a lot of people who actually have said to me, I am working from home now all the time, and I'm really missing being part of an office, because I think you do need to bounce ideas off people. You do need to be able to share challenges or successes even. And if that's, even if it's not with your own virtual team, who else could you be sharing it with? And actually I have had an idea recently of maybe setting up a sort of local virtual working gathering in my hometown, just to see how people, just somewhere to gather, maybe over lunch on a Friday afternoon, just so you can connect and network and engage. And actually I think would be fantastic, because people tend to be very blinkered in their own organizations, and I just thought that would actually be a really nice way of cross-fertilizing and mixing people up and sharing ideas. So that's, watch this space. I haven't had a chance to get around to doing that yet.
Yeah, hot off the press. So yes, you've said it now.
Yeah. But it is important, and that social connection. Human beings need social connection, and that's why this if you're only connecting socially through business meetings, it can become very, very lonely.
Yeah, and you can see how many co-working spaces are popping up all over the place, because obviously there's a need there for people that are either working remotely, virtual, or actually just independently working on their own, and it adds that dimension that they can still be in a place where others are working, and it's that social connection thing that's that they need, and most of us do need that, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I would say there are, certainly people with more of an introversion preference, probably love being at home, but I think even strong introverted preference individuals, after a while, especially it depends on personal circumstances, I suppose. If I'm a strong extroversion preference, but actually, I have children, I have a husband, my life is pretty full on, so I really enjoy being home alone. So it's about having your needs met, really, and I think that's the thing as a virtual leader, to really get to know your individual team members and understand their unique needs, what their preferences are around communication, how often to be connected with you as the leader, and to really understand what motivates them as well, because we obviously are all motivated by different things as well. So really getting to know your team, your remote team members, really proactively making an effort is so important.
Yeah, so if we focus on the leader in this scenario, then where would you tend to start with when someone comes to you and say, look, I need some help to put something in place so I can manage my virtual team better? Where would you start?
So I always start with encouraging them all to do a personality profile, and then I pulled together a team map to show how they all what diversity exists within the team around personal style. So that then gives the leader and the team members an understanding of who is what preference. And I use a tool called Insights Discovery, but there's many other tools out there, but it really helps them understand who they are at a personal level, self-awareness level, but also then understanding the diversity and how they can connect with their team members and what they need to do, what the different preferences are, and more importantly, what are the strengths that exist within that team. And you visually can see it in a wheel. So you can see, how many of each personality type is there and what does that mean for the team. So I will create a conversation virtually, imagine a training session in a classroom, but it just happens to be that everyone's sitting at their screens, but we make it very interactive, and then we just do a team session as if they were all together. And of course, from a financial and time saving perspective, to do I would do 2 hours maximum, but you can have some really powerful team building sessions when actually you're not all together.
Yes, and I've done these sessions as well, and it's just introducing scenarios and getting people to think about how they would deal with something, and comparing how those different people approach that scenario. And you can learn so much, can't you, just by having a conversation and encouraging people just to chip in and give some. Just give their opinion.
Absolutely. And there's some fabulous technology now. You could do. You can do some exercises where people break out into breakout rooms and then come back to the main room in inverted commas. So there's lots of things you can do. So I think for people to understand that just because your team are remote doesn't mean you can't do development, personal development, team development, etc. It's very, very possible to do it.
Yes, and Insights is a color model, and I use a similar model as well. And I've seen people using building blocks with different colors, and also badges with different colors on. And I guess there's no reason why you can't use that in a virtual scenario where you can probably put something on the screen which indicates the color preference, maybe.
Absolutely. And so for example, I've seen people use email signatures, so people, obviously this is more for internal comms, so people can understand the type of profile they have. There's so many clever things you can do that aren't complicated, just to help people understand you. The other thing I talk about a lot is around what is your personal brand. If I was coming to a meeting with you, even though you're within my organization, but I don't know who you are, quite often you find, and it does depend on the organization, but I'll look them up on the internal system and there's not even a photo of them. So not only do I not know what they look like, and they're not using their camera, all I have to go on is a voice. I know nothing about their background. So I talk a lot about, and this is relevant to anybody in today's world, but your personal brand, your online brand, but within organizations, it never ceases to amaze me that people don't have their credentials on show, so that if they're Googled or internally Googled as such within the internal system, that people know who they are and what they've done and where they've come from and what their background is. All of that is really important.
Yeah, and I guess it's recognizing people maybe in a different scenario. If you've seen them in a photo or on a video, then if you see them somewhere else, then it's part of the jigsaw puzzle of getting to know somebody, isn't it? And if you've got that visual thing is missing, then it's very difficult to have that, isn't it? Absolutely.
Yeah. Although I will say there was one particular man who I was working with, and he said to me that he didn't like to use video because he did a very technical job, and he felt that when he turned the video on, because he was young and he looked young, he lost respect. So that was quite interesting. But again, that can be overcome with many things. But that was an interesting challenge. I thought that's quite interesting, and that sort of unconscious bias that can go on just because you look young, and vice versa. There's also the looking older as well. So that gets thrown at me sometimes, but I still will challenge very strongly. You are who you are, and be authentic and proud of that.
Yeah, and I guess that's more of an internal thing as how they see themselves, isn't it? And it's getting over that is actually not that relevant.
Yeah.
So that's where you start, and obviously that's a really great place to start. Where do you tend to go from there once you've done that personality styling?
Well, it actually depends on the needs of the team. I mean, to me, it's about understanding what are the dynamics. And then once we understand what the dynamics are, let's look at as I would any team development day, but, is there a really clear vision of the team? It's I almost do an audit first to understand what the team has in place. Is it newly formed or has it been around for a while? So I try and assess where the team is at. And depending on that, I will then bring in, we do a workshop around communication preferences. So what are the sort of rules, again, in inverted commas, around communication? So I'll give you an example of that. Some teams like to use WhatsApp as a social connecting tool. Obviously, not to put any confidential corporate company information within that. But just sharing pictures of whatever, children, animals. Some people don't like that, and that's fine. They don't need to partake, but it is a forum for people to connect and share and feel connected to each other and build personal relationships. We look at sort of behaviors around email. So, the classic, I've seen this quite a lot, is people who are working maybe with the US, and then in fact, a client of mine last week was telling me, she gets up early, she catches up on her emails that have come in overnight, and it's really important that she then does take some time out during the day, because she's back online again sort of 2-3 o'clock onwards, and can be at her desk till midnight working with the US. So if she's not careful, she ends up working almost every single hour she's awake. So having some rules around, if I was to send you an email at 11 o'clock at night, I do not expect you to answer at 11 o'clock at night. It's just that's my preferred working schedule. So having some really open conversations about that is important as well.
Yes, that's not something I thought about, actually. Of course, time zones are obviously really important, and have an expectation of when you can expect some reply, and realizing that they are probably asleep or something, or maybe, and giving a reasonable time frame rather than expecting something to come straight back.
And that also is about personal style as well. So that needs to be a really strong conversation from the leader about what their expectations are, and so that's quite an important one. We also would look at rules around behaviors, just general team behaviors, and just as you would in a team that's co-located. Obviously, that needs to align in with corporate culture as well. But it really depends on where the team is at and what the challenges are in the moment. So there's several different areas I go, and I sort of pull together a suite of choices. The other thing just to say is, if someone is leading a team, that team still needs to be developed. So even just doing a 45-minute session on how to be more assertive or how to have more influence. Sometimes I get asked to deliver. I did a session last week up in delivering it to sort of Northern Europe region, but they were all actually at a conference, and I was just dialed in and put on a big screen. But I did put makeup on for that, and that was around helping them. It was just about communication and impact when you're working virtually. So and that was a really neat 45-minute session, and I gave them lots of tips, and they loved that. So anything that we do as leadership development professionals, you can, every team needs that, but it's putting that virtual lens on top of it. It can just create more complication, but it doesn't need to be like that. That's what I'm trying to say. There are ways of overcoming it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you were virtually training to a team that was good. So So they were a virtual team that actually were co-located for that conference, right. And I was virtual. And another one I did. I was supposed to be going up to Scotland to deliver face-to-face training on virtual leadership, and it was last year when the snow came, so I couldn't actually fly because, of course, in England everything stops. And I had to deliver it virtually, which was kind of ironic, really, when you think what I was doing. So there's been lots of different combinations of virtual leadership training
being delivered virtually or not. But it's possible. Anything can be delivered virtually as long as you have the right energy, the right tools. I normally would send out a workbook that they work through, and creating discussion. It's about making it an interactive session. That's the important thing. So it's we don't need to be sitting in airports and on motorways stuck in traffic. We can be doing this development and reaching out at any point, really.
Yeah. So if we go back to talking about leading this team, what are the typical things that are not going well that you find quite often?
Okay, so probably not that dissimilar to face-to-face teams, but I think it gets magnified because it's not picked up early enough. So the biggest one I would say is lack of trust. And that's linked to not knowing each other well enough and then creating stories about people or behaviors that are not necessarily true, but that's what's perceived because the connection and strength of relationship isn't there. So trust, building trust, I always talk about that as absolutely number one. And obviously to build trust requires lots of input in different ways, but understanding and knowing your people and allowing your people to feel safe to share and to reach out when they need support. So I would say that's absolutely number one. Going from, sorry, what was it? Remind me of the actual question.
The typical things that you find are not going particularly well when someone is trying to manage a bit.
That's it. Yeah, so it's that lack of communication, silence, so people not replying to emails, or not following up. So the classic is you send an email, you don't hear anything. Well, have you received that email? I assume you have, but you haven't replied, you haven't acknowledged it, you haven't, so there's that. And then of course the trust starts, the credibility and trust starts falling. The other thing I will always say is, people not, if deadlines or agreeing deadlines and then making sure people really do stick to those deadlines, because it's very hard to chase people up when you're not bumping into them in the office. And so one of the behaviors I really encourage people to do is, if you're not going to meet a deadline, be proactive at sending an email and saying, I committed to this. It's not going to happen due to other priorities that have come in, but I will get back to you by this date. So that really being proactive at putting your hand up and saying, I'm going to miss this deadline, or I'm finding this hard, or I'm struggling. It's being authentic and but of course you have to feel that you're in an environment where you can be that way. So that for me is what leaders need to be doing. It's really focusing on that openness and encouraging openness of communication.
And we've mentioned it a few times about email, and it can be a problem, but there are other things or tools that could be used instead of emails. And I know of a couple, Slack and Trello. These are the team. I don't know what you would call them, actually, things that you can actually share between a team. Yeah. So you're not reliant on this email communication thing, which tends to cause problems, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's Microsoft Teams is another one that people, a lot of companies are now using. There's lots of platforms out there to share information and documents on, and absolutely to really spend some time looking at which ones of those you want to use. You definitely need to have a shared area to store shared documents, definitely. And the other thing I hadn't mentioned is also just to send voice memos rather than always sending emails. It's quite nice to just do a voice memo. Now, you can do that easily on something like WhatsApp. Again, as long as it's not containing any confidential information. But I've recently come across a email system that actually, I can't remember what it's called. You might know it, Mark, where it's an email, but actually when you open it, it's a video. And it's really personal. So I had it from
Buongiorno or John Bonjour or something like that. Is that?
Yeah, not sure. It's I could look it up, but I won't do it right now. But it was brilliant, and it basically was a 60-second video. It was somebody, a communications company, interestingly, who'd sent me a proposal, and I hadn't had a chance to reply. So rather than just doing an email, she was like, "Hi, Julia, I'm just checking in to see how you are, where you are with the proposal," and it was so personal. Now, whether that would work in a corporate space, possibly not, because you'd then have voice or noise coming out unless you're sitting with headphones on, but certainly in a small business, very personal. And I thought it was really, really clever. So there's many different ways of creating that connection and personal touch.
Yeah, that's is really effective, because I'm just reminded of that. I was just recently looking at changing my car, and one of the dealers I walked into obviously got my details, and rather than just send me an email, he sent me a little video message saying, "Hi, Mark.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you for a while. Just wondering whether we can help you anymore. If I can, please get in touch." And I thought, wow, that's really good, because it's like you see him talking outside the dealership, and I thought, absolutely, that's the way things should be. It's great.
Absolutely. It's called BombBomb, BOMB.
BombBomb, right? I know. I thought it was a B. I can remember.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. I mean, it's going to be right for certain businesses and not others. But I really liked it, and I think getting used to and getting comfortable with having the video on, and just getting over it, because I know everybody hates seeing themselves on video. Well, okay, not everybody, but lots of people. And actually, by using the camera in your day-to-day meetings, you do get over yourself, and I don't even notice it now. It's just on, and that means I can use body language. People can see me. You can see my hands moving. I'm quite an expressive person. In fact, I'm sitting here moving them now, and I know you can't see, but you get that energy, and you can get energy through a camera so much more than just voice.
And I think it's the same with anything, isn't it? It's that initial, do I want to switch it on or not? And once you do it, and once you do it every time, then you don't even think about it after a while, do you? It's the norm. You just get on and do it.
Yeah. And I would always give people a warning that in my invites, I have I would prefer to meet here, but I will give them an alternative of phone number. If they only use the phone, I will then have that conversation and say, look, I really do love to meet virtually through camera. Next time we speak, it would be great if you could use that. The other thing I have done is if I so a lot of the organizations I work with use Skype, and I was really excited when they moved to Skype from Link, I think they had before, because I thought, Skype, that means video, great. Of course, no, they still carry on just clicking on the phone number rather than the actual video. So what I do now is I turn on my video, even though, and I'll say, look, I'm going to turn my video on. You don't have to turn yours on, but if you have got it there, that would be great, which gives them the opportunity to not turn it on if they don't want to. But 9 times out of 10, they turn it on. Because having me there with just a still picture of them feels kind of weird. So I actually encourage that behavior. I don't make them do it. I would never force someone to do it, but I just set that as an expectation, and it does work. And if I was a leader of a remote team, I would absolutely be setting that as an expectation.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Well, unfortunately, time is running away with us, as usual with these things. And it gets to a point now where I'm going to ask you for 3 top tips that we should all take away from this, that when we are either working in a virtual team or actually managing a virtual team, what are those 3 things that we should always remember?
Okay, so it will be no surprise to you that number 1 will be turn on your video. I don't think I need to say anything more about that. I think I've got that message across loud and clear. The second one is really take time, make time to get to know your individual team members as individuals, and allow them to get to know each other. So it's not just about you being the center of the team. It's how do you encourage that interdependency across the team, so to create time for that. And I think thirdly, which we haven't really touched on, is around being organized, preparing for your meetings, sending out pre-read. I mean, it's all good practice for any leader, but certainly in the virtual space, to really spend time thinking about how you want those meetings to work, and making sure that people truly have all the information they have so that they can contribute in the virtual meeting. So that's probably as much as I'm going to say on that for now.
Yeah, fantastic. Great stuff. And I was just thinking, actually, if you're bringing people together, there'll be some people that maybe that they're from at the start of their working day, and others that might be at the end of their working day. And I guess that's something to take into account, but we haven't got time to talk about that, unfortunately. But it's been really interesting. Thank you for your time, Julia. Hopefully we get another chance to talk about this again. But for now, I will say thank you, and hopefully see you again soon.
Thank you, Mark. It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, Please take a moment to leave a review. Don't forget to check out the Reluctant Leader project at www.thereluctantleader.co.uk. Make a note to start, stop, or continue doing whatever struck a chord in this episode. And until next time, be the best you can be.